Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Story 1. Not my case, but during my first year of law school, lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of various areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of a rather well-to-do couple that spent months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember its significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray, leaving the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. I decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. Story 2. Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home, every knob and handle was gone. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, she had taken. Every day for the next week, he would occasionally yell out, "She took the fucking knobs." Story 3. I am not a lawyer, but work in the court system. One case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her, and the wife had a child from a previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about the other child enough to support her, even though it wasn't his obligation. The judge signed the order, and they went to set up the child support account. But it got kicked back, saying you can't have 2 accounts for one child. It turned out she had been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to milk 2 fathers for one child, and the other attorney knew about it. Story 4. I didn't handle the divorce, but I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went AWOL, was living in a truck somewhere, and just couldn't handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the IRS for the results. Story 5. I'm a lawyer, but have had very limited experience in divorce cases. The first case I ever worked on, the husband shaved and waxed every single hair off his body in an attempt to avoid a court-mandated drug test. Story 6. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prized koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently, the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100,000. According to her lawyer, she was so distraught that she couldn't be in court. Only in LA. Story 7. I had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave, just to move to a different bedroom for the time being, because once he was out, the chances of him ever getting back in were slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a voicemail saying she wanted him out, and if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children. She said she would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. Story 8. I work for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Mrs. went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening, she found that Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch, and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house, documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things. She would call to amend or update her report. My goddamn oven mitts were glued to the wall, or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. Story 9. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer, and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So, as the assets were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony, to the tune of like $2,500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably about 70% of his paycheck. It turns out my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like. She was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. After some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He ended up getting a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still, to this day, can't understand why we don't talk to her much. Story 10. How about a wholesome, insane one? Not a lawyer, but this was told to me by my mom regarding the divorce she got from my dad. They couldn't settle on an alimony amount. Mom and her lawyer came in with a number, and Dad countered with a number. They couldn't agree, because my dad thought my mom should get twice the amount in alimony she was asking for, and my mom didn't want my dad to give her that much money per month. It took months for them to settle on a figure that appeased both of them. Even then, my mom puts aside the extra above what she wanted in case my dad ever has a financial emergency, and my dad puts aside the extra she didn't want in case my mom ever has a financial emergency. The funny thing is, they don't know the other is putting the money aside for the other. My mom told me about her emergency stash, and my dad told my brother about his emergency stash. Bro and I discussed it while talking about what nut jobs our parents are. Edit. I've gotten a lot of support for this response. Thank you. I'm not going to say that their divorce was perfect. It wasn't. There were still some hurt feelings and resentment from all parties involved. However, my parents, for all their flaws, both accepted their own responsibilities for the falling apart. I think it helps that they still loved each other deeply. They just weren't in love anymore. They have been friends since my mom was 2 and my dad was 3. Started dating when my mom was 12 and my dad was 13. They separated at the ages of 49 and 50. It makes sense that they grew apart. I've had a few people ask why they divorced in the first place. My dad had had a girlfriend for at least 15 years, possibly longer. My mom knew, but they agreed not to divorce until my younger brother had graduated high school. My dad got remarried to his girlfriend, and my mom has also since remarried. All 4 of them get along famously now. The separation and divorce happened about 10 years ago. I'm very lucky to have 4 parents who care about me and who absolutely adore my own little dudes. Story 11. I worked at an airport. A big burly guy brought an ugly dog in a crate to the counter, and he was clearly misty-eyed. It turns out his wife got the dog in the divorce, and he had to send it to her. She told him that as soon as she got the dog, she was going to put it down. He asked if he could have some time with the dog before the flight. So they went out in the grass, and they both rolled around, the dog's tail wagging away, not knowing anything about his future. The guy put him back in the crate, dropped him off at the counter, said thanks, and then just walked out, head down, looking crushed. That was 30 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Story 12. My uncle's ex tried to work it into the divorce settlement that she would get half of whatever my grandmother would leave him when she passes. The joke's on her. My grandmother is passing over her kids. Not maliciously, my uncle is very well off, and so is my mom, and leaving everything to my brother and me. Oh, she also tried to get sole custody of both of their children, who are in their 20s. Story 13. This isn't my divorce, but my divorce lawyer told me about a case she was involved in, where both clients were so petty that they had to meet and argue over literally every single item of everything. The final object that neither would settle on was a ceramic rabbit statue. A really generic one from Home Depot, or something like that. It had 0 sentimental value. But since it was the last item, neither side wanted to lose the final thing, and they dragged it out over 3 separate meetings for this one object. I don't remember who ended up getting it, but once they settled and signed everything, the winning party stuck it on their lawyer's desk as a gift and walked out. Story 14. I worked at a computer repair store as a sales technician. A guy came in with a desktop that he wanted Windows reinstalled on. I asked him if he wanted me to back up all of his data first, and he told me that he had everything he wanted, and just to do the wipe. I put it in the queue, and he paid and left. I started the process about an hour later since an XP install only took about 45 minutes off the network. I didn't bother doing anything else except deleting the original partition, making a new one, and installing Windows. About an hour after that, his wife came running in, asking if we had a computer with Smith as the last name. I told her I did, and she showed me her ID, saying that her husband had brought it in to try and destroy all the proof of him cheating and stealing money from their business. When she asked if I had wiped everything yet, I told her I just did a Windows install and didn't actually wipe anything completely. I called her husband and told him the situation. I told him his wife was here to get the computer. He asked if I had reinstalled Windows like we discussed, and I told him I had. He said, "I don't give a shit, give her the computer. There isn't anything left on it anyway." I said all right and hung up. I told her that he said I could give it to her, and then explained how reinstalling Windows doesn't magically delete everything. I explained how I could recover all of her files in a couple of hours. I ended up staying late that night, and she bought me pizza and Mountain Dew. I managed to recover every file he had tried to have me destroy, and made multiple copies for her. She even called him from the store, reading off some of the messages he had tried to delete from his emails. I was a bit worried that he might come back to confront me, but nothing else ever came of it. Story 15. My dad is a divorce attorney. One of his clients couldn't decide who would get the Labrador puppies from a new litter they had just bred. The pups were worth $1,000 each. Well, the clients also hadn't been up to date on their payments, so my dad brought the litter of 8 floppy puppies home as collateral until they could negotiate the settlement. It was so much fun for us.